As always, the views expressed on this channel are my own, so I take full responsibility for anything that I say or do. And if it's anything terribly bad, I hope someone has the courtesy enough to contact me and say something. But today's President's Day, February 19th, 2024. And it's interesting, the topic of my daily devotional is the meaning of grace. The meaning of grace. So, but it was on my heart today because there's words these days that are so controversial. First of all, I like to preface my little bit of a vlog about English is a fairly new language. I think that they really established English probably in the last, I want to say the last maybe 800 years. I think from what I researched, the oldest language in existence is like any language kind of in India and Asia. I think they call it Indonesian language. So English is a language that is totally a lot of languages. It's funny, here in California, we actually have a lot of Spanish. We use a lot of Spanish in our English. It's just the norm. People, there's a few words that I guess they say pocas palabras. It's few. There's a few words that in California we use, especially in Southern California. So if you hear people using Spanish, it's just the vernacular of the language. So with that said, the word history has become so controversial. Wrap your mind around that for a minute, how words become so controversial. So the word history in the last 10 years, people, I don't know where they get this from, and I guess for a while I was like, what? His? It says the prefix of the word is his. So they say his story. So then later on people will say, how about her story? But again, see, it's just like history is from the Greek, that means kind of witness, judge, recording, documentation. History, the story, there is story, but in the Greek, look it up for yourself, the origin of the word history. I did read about it a little bit before I did this vlogging because I wanted to have a little bit of something that you guys could kind of work with. But history is an English word that was used, maybe it started to be used in according to what I read, the 1300s was the first time that was used. So English probably is still a fairly new language. It really is. Like if you think about the Bible translations, and the Bible was originally written in Arabic and Greek and Hebrew language. Those were all the languages in the Middle East. And it was translated into English, I believe, by Wycliffe. Again, a lot of my facts might not be accurate, but that's why I say everything. Even anybody that does any content on the YouTube machine, you need to take it like with a grain of salt, they say. Just saying, you gotta season it. So you need to not be so eager to latch onto things that sound really good to you. It's like, oh, it sounds really good that history, oh, it was documentation by men recorded certain events, and they have a bias. Not all men recorded and documented historical events in a biased way. So don't let people convince you that, oh, well, this is only this way because this person had a bias on history. Just like, let me give you an example since it's President's Day. Supposedly, Abraham Lincoln slept with a man. Think about it for a minute. When we think about terminology like that, you slept. Like, if I slept with a girl, it's likely it means that there was something more involved. Okay? If I sleep with a guy, it's not likely. There might be a context for that. So the word sleep for Abraham Lincoln, he slept with a man, means that he literally slept. They slept. Back then, it wasn't a sexual thing. It could have been a very practical reason that you're sharing a bed with a man. This is like, over 200 years ago? These days, if I use that kind of terminology, people get confused. Like the word dating. I'm going on a date with a woman. I'm going on a date. It means that I'm going on a date. So all this terminology will change over time to mean different things, which is frustrating because words have meanings. But we're growing in a culture that the words don't mean anything. But you think of like history. When you think of the word history, you're like, wait a second. It's a guy writing a story. So his story is not really like my content, Interworld 75 content on my main channel. I try to tell stories. Those could technically, if someone's talking about it, those are his stories in the English vernacular. But in the original Greek, history meant to record, documentation of events or whatever the case. So women could write history. History essentially is not like it's not talking about male or female or anything like that. Because this culture that we live in was obsessed about gender and sex and all that stuff. Just like sleeping with somebody. In this culture, is like, oh, you're actually having intercourse. So just think for a minute. The terminology of what makes up history and what people think of it as, because everyone's obsessed about their story. So their story and history and the witnesses of certain events could document the event, but is that event documented accurately? So keep that in mind when someone tells you history is just twisted by men. I mean, mankind is twisted, obviously, if you are really being real with yourself. You got to think about how, how history or the world's events is not as bad as they could be. I mean, think about it. Wrap it around your mind for a minute. That things aren't really as bad as they could be. They could be way worse. I'm not wishing that. But the whole point of this vlogging is like how terminology loses its meaning. And English is a language that's mixed up with a lot of different languages. Like, think of the word deja vu. It's a word we use in English, but deja vu is like, oh, totally French. It's a French thing, but we use it in the English vernacular. There's like a lot of crossover words that we use these days. Like we'll use in California, we'll use amigo. Amigo means friend, but it's just a common word that we use. There's a lot of common words in the English language that's English, and then it's just, we call it English, but it's really originated from other languages. Like even think about Spanish. Dormir, I'm probably not saying it right, but dormir means to sleep. But in English, dormir is dormant, and it's like the same idea. Dormant is like when something's sleeping, something's laying low until hibernation or whatever it's called. So when someone's trying to tell you that history is men or males recording and documented and twisting up history, just question that. Honestly. Just like my little emoji on my YouTube, we need to question everything. Question everything. Question God. He's not bothered. He actually wants us to question him, because it will make us dig deeper into expanding our mind. So hopefully you got something out of this YouTube thing, and if you actually enjoyed my vlogging, please let me know. It would be nice to know, for me to know if I'm impacting you in any kind of way. I know that I do all kind of different topics, but today's President's Day, and it was really on my heart to talk about terminology and words and all this stuff. And it's all to do with the history. What is taking place today? You can't define the past by what's happening today. Today is the result of the past, but the past is not the result of today.